Hello, this is Robert Rickover. I'm an Alexander Technique teacher in Omaha, Nebraska. My guest is Imogen Ragone, an Alexander Technique teacher in Wilmington, Delaware. And we're going to talk today about perfection. And actually, more specifically, this interview is part of an ongoing series of ours, parsing quotes from Alexander and some of his students and trying to make sense of exactly what they mean. And in this case, the Alexander quote that we're going to talk about is, and I'll read it, and I'll also put it and a couple of other things related to it in the description. But here's the quote from FM. If you get perfection today, you will be farther away from perfection than you ever were. So that's a pretty provocative quote. And I'd like to mention a quote from an entirely different source, namely the Bible, that has some resonance with it, which is, and I will read this is from Proverbs 26:12. If you see a man who thinks himself wise, there is no more hope for a dullard than for him.
There is more hope for a dullard.
There is more hope, there is more
Yeah.
hope for a dullard than for him. Seems a little bit related.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's another quote to take into account from Alexander, just to muddy the waters a little. Here's a second quote from Alexander. Every man, woman, and child holds the possibility of physical perfection. It rests with each of us to attain it by personal understanding and effort. So, getting back to the original quote by FM, what's your take on that?
Well, my initial take or reaction, you might say, to it, if you get perfection today, you will be farther away from perfection than you ever were, is that it's really discouraging. It's like, if you take it on face value, it's like, what's the point?
Right.
You
work and you work, or you think and get to a goal. And once you get there, you're not only back to where you started,
you're
further back. It is discouraging, isn't it?
Yeah. However, I think I might understand something of what he was trying to get at. So
Let's hear it.
One way that I might think of it is that in kind of Alexander technique terms, if for a moment you've done all your directing and you're inhibiting and your use just seems to be flowing and the best use you've ever had of your whole being, that the catch would be that you try and hang on to it, you try and recreate it, and that's going to put you further away because you're not sticking with the process you went to, whereby you attained that wonderful moment of I don't know about perfect use. What is perfect? But extremely good use.
Well, you might think at that moment, this is perfection. And there's going to be a huge temptation to try to recreate it.
Yeah.
Huge temptation. So that's certainly, and I would say even more dangerous, perhaps, would be you're taking a lesson with a skilled Alexander technique teacher, using their hands to help you change your use pattern. And it creates a spectacular change for the better. and you and everyone around you notices it, and of course you feel it too, and you think, well, again, let's try to hang on to this. But it's even worse than the example you gave, because you didn't really bring it about yourself. So you
Not all on you, yeah.
Once you get caught up in the trap we talked about, that you don't really have a chance to go back and rethink how you're going to approach your response to effects of a direction, because you didn't really use a direction, or you didn't inhibit. You just let a teacher help you to do that. You have no idea how you got to this new place. So that's a possibility too.
Yes. And it could be something a bit in between, you know. Many Alexander lesson situations would involve the guidance and invitation from a skilled teacher's hand, and they're inviting you to do some thinking and being aware, but you're not doing it all on your own, if you like.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, another way of, I mean, they're all kind of interrelated, but maybe, we're just disregarding Alexander's quote about physical perfection for a moment, maybe the situation is perfection isn't something that's really available here on planet Earth. So
well, I certainly yes, agree
you
with that. What is
believe that
perfection?
you have achieved perfection, then your thinking is actually delusional, and
I was going to say
you need to come to terms with that before you can even start moving towards a better use. So you're not just a person coming, say, for their first lesson, the first minute of the first lesson. You're someone who needs to go back even before and just really get that perfection isn't really the goal of all this. It's improvement, right? Maybe something like that.
Yes, I definitely. I think perfection as a goal is
not a good goal.
not a helpful thing, because it's like you say, it's not achievable, but we can make improvements. Yeah.
Now, if we turn to his second quote, the one about everybody's capable of physical perfection, and he goes on to say you would get that in part by effort. There are problems with that. The effort part, certainly. Usually, I think most Alexander teachers would agree they don't want their students to effort to make. It's not a great strategy for bringing about a useful change.
Yes, I do think that the way we Alexander technique teachers, if I can dare to generalize for a moment, use the word effort, or actually don't want to use the word effort or try, is because we associate that word with excess physical tension that people are bringing to bear. And what we are mostly aiming to help our students with is reducing the amount of excess tension, so that we get nearer just using the appropriate amount of effort, the appropriate amount for
the appropriate amount of effort as we go through life. But
yes,
but to make an actual change in our use pattern, effort's not a good idea. And Marge, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, it depends how you think of the word effort, and to give FM in this case the benefit of the doubt, which I'm being very generous here, is that in this case he means that you are really committed to doing your means whereby. You're committed to going through the Alexander technique process of inhibiting and directing, and through that commitment and your understanding of the work, I don't know whether I can get over the physical perfection bit, but that you can improve.
Right. Right.
So effort could be interpreted as
you need to not only kind of get, perhaps from some experience of lessons or working on your own, that it's possible to bring about improvement. But you have to also kind of commit. I think Alexander said, someone said to Alexander, apparently, oh, I see this is a lifelong sentence or something like that. And Alexander, I guess, agreed. I mean, you have to really get that you don't just do a little directing, have some lessons, improve, and then, okay, I don't need to do anything else.
So
I mean, it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, so you could see that the effort is not talking about the excess muscular tension. It's talking about that continued,
Just
all the words I use have a kind of effort, like I was going to say striving, and I'm like, no, not striving, but determination or commitment to,
good. Yeah, I think
determination to stick with the means whereby whenever possible. So
Marjorie Barlow, in her book, Thinking, no, not Thinking, what's
unexamined life, nothing.
Right, really good book, highly recommended. She quotes Alexander as saying, basically, that the ability to have a thought, to put out a thought, but not act on it, that is like a really high skill level that it's worth developing. And he said that's what thinking is really all about. Now, of course, physiologically, I don't think you can ever think a thought without some physical correlate going on, and but it's one thing for that to happen. I think that's inevitable. But to think a thought like, oh, let's say I'm thinking my neck is free, and part of me is actually kind of monitoring what's going on there. Well, that's an effort, and it's not a useful one. It harms, maybe even destroys the effect of the direction. Now the other thing that the other thing, though, then going back to his something I think we need to address a little bit is when Alexander is saying these two things, is he saying them to a particular student at a particular time? That's often a criticism, like on a Facebook group when someone like me posts a quote from Alexander or somebody else, people say, well, he may have said that to a particular student at a certain time, but doesn't necessarily mean it's for everybody. So possibly, I would think that first quote could have been something that he said to a particular person who wrote it down, and it's now in his list of quotes. And in that case, I think in that first quote, if you get perfection today, you will be further away. Maybe the word today is a key word there, that maybe he was talking to someone who was obviously pretty far away from perfection, but thought they had gotten there. Although he doesn't say that exactly. He says, if you get it, but let's just say maybe maybe if they had said to him a few months later or a few years later, hey, I'm pretty close to perfect, he might have said, oh yeah, okay, but not at this point. Although I kind of doubt that.
It is hard to know exactly without the context.
It is. But so that quote could have been to a person, but the other one, every man, woman, and child, that sounds like, hey, this is how the world is.
It's a very sweeping statement. Holds the possibility of physical perfection.
Well, the thing about physical perfection
what does it mean?
What does it mean? To me, I mean, if you really believe in mind-body unity, which Alexander certainly seemed to, and that if every man, woman, and child holds the possibility of physical perfection, the implication is they're holding the possibility of all of the other kinds of perfection. What would they be? Mental, psychological, emotional, whatever. So he almost seems to be saying that possibility is there, and we just need to unlock it.
I would,
yeah,
just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
If I was to entertain that such a thing as physical perfection were possible, I would believe that it's to do with that integration of mind and body.
It would have to, wouldn't it?
Yes.
It would have to.
Yeah.
You're not going to get physically perfect in Alexander terms. Your use is just amazing. And not have changes, and hopefully good changes in other aspects of you. They can't really be separated.
And that's what I hope he's getting at, is not some sort of external physical perfection, but more that everyone has the possibility of this kind of integrated good use. And I'm actually not even sure about that, but what do you think?
I really don't know. There's so many ways of looking at that. There is another little anecdote about Alexander that's relevant to this. Someone apparently, maybe on his first training course, I'm not sure, someone asked him, well, do you ever get to a place where you don't need to direct anymore? And Alexander is reputed to have said, yes, that can happen. But when you get to that point, you won't want to not direct. You wouldn't want to. And then the question is, well, what does that mean? And maybe I thought about that. And one explanation could be, let's say you really, you were really close to being perfect, let's say. And let's say your job was to guide hikers through a forest where the trails were not marked, and any regular person could very easily get lost, but you, the guide, knows where things are. But if you were in that position, I think you would do well to take a GPS with you just in case, right?
I see what you're getting at.
How that relates to this, I'm not sure. But I think this whole question of perfection and the Alexander technique and what one can say about it, I'm sure there are a lot of other takes on this. I think we're just kind of scratching the surface. And
I would love to hear them. I find the word perfection and the concept, let's put it like challenging. And I would also say that one of the things that I end up working with students on sometimes is it's kind of an end gaming toward this kind of perfect whatever it is that they want, and it's actually being able to back off this kind of striving for perfection and be with the process. And
because you're striving for an end result, and directions and inhibition and all that are about what's happening right now in this moment,
Yeah.
and how can I make things a little easier on myself, or how can I make an improvement in what's going on right now, but not necessarily, if I aim towards the end point, I'm going to get caught in a dead end in terms of what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's
another quote I just occurred to me from an entirely different source, but kind of says the same thing. There is a country music singer. Can't think of his name. He is a song called "The Gambler." Kenny Rogers, I think. Kenny Rogers. So it's a great song, "The Gambler." Look it up on YouTube. And in there, an old guy's giving advice to a young guy about poker, and here are the words that he says in the song. You got to know when to hold them. You got to know when to fold them. You got to know when to walk away, and you need to know when to run. And then here's the part I really love. Don't count your cards while you're sitting at the table. Don't count your winnings while you're sitting at the table. There's time enough for counting when the game is done. And what he's saying is, let's say you're on a winning streak playing poker and you got all these chips in front of you. You think, wow, this might be enough to pay off my yacht payment.
It's going to distract you from
It'll
the game, the
distract you
process.
from the process.
Yeah.
And a good poker player, I'm guessing, I'm not one myself, I'm not a poker player, but a good poker player must understand that at some level to be good.
Yes.
I think that's the case. Okay, anything else you want to say about this topic?
I can't think of anything right now except that it's a very thought-provoking. These are very thought-provoking quotes, and I would love to hear other people's take or insights on possible other meanings or their reactions to them, all of it. So
and please send us send us stuff, comment on the YouTube site, or we'll be putting this on the Facebook page, and comment there. I think it's worth a lot more discussion than we have time or probably the ability to do.
Indeed. Yeah.
All right. Well, my guest today has been Imogen Ragone, an Alexander teacher in Wilmington, Delaware. I'll put a link to her site, a link to a site where you can learn more about the Alexander technique as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.